Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marcagiani. I have an amazing guest on today's show, Dr. David Jockers. David's a phenomenal clinician, functional medicine doc, chiro, and good friend. David, welcome to the show, man. Really excited to have you on. I know you have your Keto Edge Summit going live really soon, and I want to make sure everyone knows about that. If you're listening to this now, we're going to put a link below on screen. We'll put like a little card as well link where you can click in and you can get over and subscribe to that summit where you can get access to a ton of great speakers. I was able to speak on that summit too and drop some good information. So David, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Awesome, Dr. J. Great to be on with you. Always honored to be on your show. It's one of my top subscriptions on iTunes. Listen to you guys, you and Evan, all the time. So great to make a little cameo on here.
Thanks, Doc. I appreciate it. And again, the ketogenic diet is one of the fastest trending types of diets. And the reason why I like a ketogenic diet, one of the big things, it shifts your metabolic machinery around from being a sugar burner to being a fat burner. I love that because fat is like clean fuel. Sugar kind of burns like dirty diesel fuel. Fat burns clean and has many metabolic, neurological advantages. I know we talked pre-show, we wanted to go over the top 5 benefits or the top 5 myths of a ketogenic diet, and we wanted to dispel them one by one. And I just wanted to let any listener know here, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I have my little iceberg picture back here. This is the tip of the ketogenic iceberg. So anyone listening, if you resonate at all with this info, click down below and make sure you subscribe to Dr. Jockers Summit. Great info here. David, what's your number one ketogenic diet myth?
Yeah, I've been teaching and writing about the ketogenic diet for a long time and applying it myself. And these are the common myths that I come across when people hear about keto. And number one is really that it's a weight loss diet. And this is typically how most people get started with a ketogenic diet is they hear about it. Maybe they saw a testimonial or something along those lines. They hear about it being a great weight loss diet. And it certainly is. In fact, I think it's the best diet out there for weight loss if that's your goal. However, Dr. J, I have never tried to lose weight my entire life. I've always been underweight. And so, for me, I apply a ketogenic lifestyle and, I'm not trying to lose weight. I'm actually just trying to maintain muscle mass. And the cool thing about it is when you have ketones elevated in your bloodstream, it actually preserves your blood leucine levels. And leucine has this anabolic effect where it helps your body preserve lean body tissue. So we're setting this message to the genome saying, hey, preserve lean body tissue and just burn fat for fuel. And even though I'm really, really thin, I'm typically like 7 or 8% body fat. I still have enough body fat to last me. I mean, I could go weeks without food and I would still have enough body fat to actually preserve and to produce ketones and utilize energy. And so, it's really not just for weight loss, although it definitely is a tool that can be used for weight loss. It's really a great tool for enhanced brain function, performance, memory, reducing inflammation throughout the body. I mean, there's so many different things, so many different benefits that we can get from a ketogenic lifestyle and spending time, right? Having this metabolic flexibility where we spend time, maybe not all the time, but spending time throughout our life in ketosis.
Absolutely love it. So the ketogenic diet is not just a lifestyle, or I should say, not just a weight loss diet, lots of other neurological benefits. Awesome. Now, just kind of like looking at the weight loss can be a big one because insulin resistance is a major cause of weight gain. So a lot of people that are over secreting insulin, that gets at the excess carbohydrate, it taps out the muscle, taps out the liver, and then it goes into the fat. So you have it on one side where it can help improve fat, but it's not just a fat loss, weight loss diet.
That's right.
Cognitive benefits. So what's the first cognitive benefit, the thing that people aren't aware of with the ketogenic diet?
Yeah, so with our brain, basically our brain could run off of somewhere between 50 to some people say up to 2/3 of energy production can be through ketones. So most people, and Dr. J, you and I learned when we were going through school that the brain depended upon glucose. But now we realize that actually we can create a lot of neurological energy through ketones, through breaking down ketones. And so when we start to transition our metabolism and become keto adapted, it significantly downregulates inflammation. So it shuts down the neuroinflammasome, this genetic pathway that amplifies inflammation throughout the brain. So when we do that, that reduces our risk, obviously, of neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, but also for younger people that that would be developing those diseases over a 30 to 40, 50-year period. we're not necessarily concerned. Like, I'm 36, I'm not thinking about Alzheimer's now, but I'm thinking about, hey, I want to get up and I want to be the best father, husband. I want to be the best doctor. I want to think sharply and quickly, and be able to perform at my peak. And that's really when I'm burning ketones, when ketones are my primary fuel, that's how I feel. I feel awesome. I feel like I'm performing at my highest level. My energy levels are amazing. It's also great for skin, reduces inflammation throughout the whole body. So reduces pain, reduces inflammation in the skin. But just in general, you'll notice just kind of this very clear feeling in your mind where you're able to come up with thoughts and ideas, and you're able to be more creative, and you've got basically better cognitive processing speed. So you're able to think sharply and quickly. It's a preferred state for your brain to be in.
Love it. Totally. I know Dr. Veach over at Harvard has found that many people with neurological issues, there are certain parts of the brain that become resistant to using glucose for fuel, but those parts of the brain can tap into ketones for fuel. So that's like a different fuel source, which is great. And again, your brain only needs about 20 grams of glucose a day. It's not a lot. I mean, if you're eating, some broccoli and some veggies and kind of non-starchy veg, you can get enough just from that. Now, that kind of leads us into the next myth here. Is a ketogenic diet all meat? And again, I see with my plate, with how I eat, I'm kind of a paleo cyclical ketogenic person, but I eat a lot of times more vegetables than I see other vegans eat. So let's hit that myth.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of different versions of the ketogenic diet. And so a lot of people don't realize this, but there's a lot of different keto influencers out there online, on YouTube and whatnot. And people have different, different versions of it. And so there are people that promote a very, very strong meat-based ketogenic approach. However, a ketogenic diet does not need to be like that. In fact, that's not really how I recommend it. And in functional medicine, we don't recommend that. We recommend really a micronutrient-rich ketogenic diet and lifestyle. And basically that looks like a lot of vegetables. And so you've got all these non-starchy vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, collard greens. These are all very, very low carb, high fiber, high micronutrients. You got things like sea vegetables, avocados, olives, which are really good, healthy, full fat foods that are also rich in micronutrients, rich in prebiotic fibers. And so you've got a ton of vegetables. In fact, when I'm working with cancer patients, I actually have a whole program that's built around a plant-based ketogenic diet. So it's a plant-based ketogenic approach where we have very little animal products in there. And so why? Because we're trying to really control protein intake. So not to say that animal protein is bad. I'm a fan of it. I know, Dr. J, you're a fan of it.
Yeah.
We consume meat. I pretty much consume a serving of meat every day, pretty much, unless I'm fasting. However, we just make sure that, we really want to focus on micronutrients, and it's not a meat-only diet or a meat-based diet. Meat really is going to be more like 20 to maybe 30% of your daily food intake when you're on kind of a normalized ketogenic diet. Obviously, if you're really, really active, if you're doing a lot of resistance training, things like that, you might be able to handle a little bit higher levels of protein. But typically roughly around 30%. But if you're more sedentary, you're looking at more like 15 to maybe up to 20% of your calories coming from protein. And most meat is real dense in protein. So when we do meat, we like higher fatty cuts, grass-fed, pasture raised, right? Getting it all raised correctly so we have the right fatty acid ratios, and that the animals were raised and treated properly. But the baseline there is we're looking at a micronutrient-rich diet, which includes healthy animal products because they are rich in micronutrients, but also includes a lot of vegetables and plant-based foods.
Excellent. I think a lot of vegetarians or vegans, they forget that a lot of the animal meat gets its nutrient density from concentrating plant matter. So that's the benefit that you get when you eat animals. If they're pasture raised and they're raised properly, you get this concentration, this bioaccumulation of plant nutrition. I mean, I've read in places where 1 pound of grass-fed meat is 6 to 8 pounds of plant matter. So that's one of the great benefits that we have. And then also the benefit of eating good quality meats is we don't have this high carbohydrate to protein ratio. If you look at most vegetarian proteins in nature, right, outside of a protein powder or outside of like a soy protein that's concentrated, it's about 2/3 to 3/4 starch to about 1/3 to 1/4 protein. So you get a lot of carbs, per protein. So like rice and beans, for instance, you get about 80 grams of carbohydrates per about 20, 25 grams of protein. So it's going to be really tough to be vegetarian or vegan and be plant-based at the same time. So how are you doing it? I imagine you're using maybe some pea protein or some concentrated protein powders and adding coconut, MCT oil, fat, avocado oil. What does that look like?
Yeah, so plant-based ketogenic diet, I use that with my cancer patients because really, on a normal ketogenic diet, you're looking at somewhere around 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And if you're really active, you're doing a lot of strength training, trying to build lean body tissue, you might be able to go up to like 1.5 to 1.6 grams per kilogram. Whereas when somebody has cancer, we really want to reduce that. One big reason is because excess protein is going to stimulate the mTOR genetic pathway, which stimulates cell reproduction. So we're looking at like 0.5 grams per kilogram. So for example, I'm about 160 pounds, which is roughly about 72, 73 kilograms. So if I were to take half of that, half the kilograms in protein, it's like 36 grams of protein a day. And so if I were to break that into, let's say, 2 feeding periods, it's roughly 15 to 20 grams of protein per feeding period. Okay. And so we could do that obviously with things like seeds, hemp seeds, stuff like that. We could also do it with protein powders, right? And on the plant-based ketogenic diet, I actually do recommend like collagen protein. So it's not a vegan diet. We actually recommend glycine rich, basically amino acids like a collagen protein or bone broth protein or something along those lines can be really, really healthy. And I actually I don't say, hey, you can't eat meat on this plan. It's more so just watching how much, because in 1 ounce of chicken, you have something like 7 or 8 grams of protein. So if you're trying to hold yourself to 20 grams of protein in a meal, that's like 2.5 ounces. Most people are used to eating 4 to 6, sometimes 8 ounces of meat in one meal. Okay. And so it's very easy to get that protein up 50, 60 grams, which is going to stimulate that mTOR pathway. And again, individuals with cancer, we're not able to test for this yet, but we hypothesize that, I just pretty much lump everybody with cancer, with fast growing cancer, into this model of, hey, a hyperactive mTOR genetic pathway. And so we want to reduce that protein as well as the carbohydrate and make it up with a lot of healthy fats, avocados, olives, olive oil, coconuts. We do recommend grass-fed butter on there because of the conjugated linoleic acid, the fat-soluble nutrients, vitamin A, vitamin E. You got choline in there, all kinds of powerful nutrients for the body. So it's not a vegan approach. But it is more plant-based because we're not doing high amounts of meat in that.
That's great. Excellent. Yeah. Good rule of thumb that I use with my patients is, depending on where you're at, typically 2 to 3 times more fat than protein. So I'm 210 pounds, right? So I may consume on the protein side, if I'm lifting weights, maybe half to 3/4 of a gram per pound of body weight. So that may look like, for me, 120 or so. Grams of protein, maybe up to 150. And then I would then double that to triple that for my fat. So 250 to 300 grams. And like I start my day with just pure fat and some collagen peptides with my coffee. So I try to really jumpstart my day. What's your take on that kind of ratio? Does that kind of match your math a little bit there too?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that works great because you got to remember you got 9 grams of calories per 9 grams of calories per 9 calories per gram of fat.
Yes, correct.
So basically, so you want to get roughly 60 to 80% of your calories from these fat sources to be in ketosis. The more active you are, the more your body's going to be able to handle a little bit higher amount of carbohydrate and protein. So like for me, I can handle a little bit more protein, particularly on training days. So I'm roughly in that 80 to 100 gram range, right? On training days.
Correct.
I fast 1 day a week, right? And so, of course, when I'm fasting, that's my protein restriction day. And I think this is a really good rule of thumb, unless somebody's dealing with, severe health issues and they really struggle with fasting, where you're actually able to create some variation in your diet. You might have a feasting day where you may overconsume a little bit of protein and carbs, and that can be kind of good for stimulating the thyroid. Obviously, we'll get into that myth.
Yep.
And then also doing a little bit of like a protein restriction day, where you dial it down lower, your body's able to stimulate more autophagy in that case, and really be able to do more healing and repair. Even though we use protein for healing and repair, actually restricting the protein stimulates more healing and repair when you do it for short periods of time.
That's great. And I do notice that in the earlier studies, 'cause I know the first ketogenic diet they started coming out with in the 1920s for epilepsy, Mayo Clinic was behind a lot of this. And they were finding it was really a great first line therapy for epilepsy, having seizures.
Oh, yeah.
And they dropped the protein down below, I think, 8%.
Yeah.
Now, one of the side effects of going too low was the kids in these studies also had very low IGF-1, which is a growth hormone precursor, and they actually had stunted height. So one of the things that you can do is up that protein to 15, even up to 25%. They found that they still had the same benefits, but didn't have the low IGF-1 and the low height stuff. But again, if it's a cancer issue, decreasing that IGF-1 can also help decrease that cancer cell growth too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the faster the cancer growth, like a metastatic cancer, something that's growing faster, you definitely want protein restriction. You want to do more fasting. You want to slow cell reproduction. That's your whole goal there. Whereas, somebody like you or I, and probably most of the listeners on here, can certainly handle higher amounts of protein, roughly around 20% of their calorie intake.
Excellent. Very good. Myth number 3. Is a ketogenic diet bad for the microbiome?
There's a lot of health influencers out there that say that. They say, if you're applying this ketogenic approach, it's going to be really bad for the microbiome because we don't have enough prebiotic fibers in there. But if you're doing it correctly, the way that I teach it, the way that you teach it, Dr. J, you're actually getting tons of prebiotic fibers. I mean, in one avocado, you've got as much fiber as you have in oatmeal, right? People are eating oatmeal for breakfast, which is spiking their blood sugar, driving up insulin levels, causing inflammation in their body. And they're thinking, well, I'm getting the fiber, right? Which is kind of like, the main reason why people eat oatmeal from a nutrition perspective, because there's really not much nutrients in it to begin with. Whereas avocado's got twice as much. It's got as much as 2 cups or two bowls of oatmeal. So getting avocados into your diet, you're going to get tons of prebiotic fibers. Olives are another really good source. Dark green leafy vegetables. You've got things like radishes. You've got artichoke is a really good one. You've got all your cruciferous vegetables, cauliflower, broccoli, things like that. So really, really good for the microbiome. And there's actually been studies where, for example, Frontiers in Microbiology in 2017, they took a group of individuals with multiple sclerosis and they compared them to healthy adults, and they found that the individuals with multiple sclerosis, as we would expect in functional medicine, had a disordered microbiome. They had dysbiosis. They had a whole lot of pathogenic bacteria in their system. And so when they put them on a ketogenic diet and they were checking them, measuring or looking at their stool analysis over a period of time, they found that after 6 months, it was completely normalized, right? That they actually had the 10 individuals they had with MS had very similar gut bacteria makeup as healthy adults who weren't expressing an autoimmune disease. And
that's
so
great.
That keto approach, right? And they've actually been looking at this with epilepsy too, because really, ultimately, we know that ketogenic diet has been well studied in epileptic kids to reduce this neuroinflammasome and to create better balance between the excitatory neurotransmitter glutamate and GABA. And these kids with epilepsy, they end up with neuroexcitation because they have poor conversion of glutamate to GABA is one of the reasons. And so glutamate will excite the brain cells, right? GABA helps slow them down and balance them. And so we want good balance there, so we're able to think sharply and quickly, okay? But also we're able to calm ourselves. We don't have anxiety, we don't have seizures, right? Things like that. And so these individuals with epilepsy, we know that that's the case, but they hadn't looked at their gut. And so just recently we started doing studies looking in detail at epileptic kids' guts, and they found that, they're really high in things like proteobacteria, like Vibrio and Salmonella and stuff like that. And following a ketogenic approach, that they're able to normalize that gut bacteria as well and see significant changes there. So really cool stuff as far as what happens when you have a dysbiosis and you start following a ketogenic approach. It should improve, right? You should get improvements over time.
Yeah, a lot of dysbiotic bacteria is going to happen from refined sugar consumption. inflammatory foods like gluten and grains and bad trans fats, and of course antibiotic use, which creates that rebound yeast overgrowth. So yeah, starving out some of those critters can help as well. And I even find a lot of patients have other infections too, and they may have to have those infections kind of knocked out, whether it's an H.
Yes.
pylori or another type of parasite. But you made some good points. I mean, let's say you're keeping your carbohydrates down to 30 net grams a day. Well, if you look at, like, let's say a serving of broccoli, once you subtract the fiber, it's down to 3 to 4 grams of carbohydrates. So, I mean, you can do 6 to 8 servings of a non-starchy vegetable. That's a lot of fiber going into your gut.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're going to get a lot of prebiotic fiber, and touching base on using antimicrobials. I mean, really, ultimately, like in cancer, one of the growing theories with in a sense, I shouldn't say the word curing, but helping our body overcome cancer is this press pulse theory that Dr. Thomas Seyfried, who I interviewed in the Keto Edge Summit, he has really pioneered this idea, as well as Dr. Dominic D'Agostino down at University of South Florida, doing a lot of research on that. I also interviewed him. He talks a lot about this press pulse theory of cancer, where basically we're going to press it metabolically, right? So meaning that we're going to restrict the glucose consumption, we're going to restrict the main metabolic fuel of the cancer cells, and then we can pulse it with an oxidative therapy. And that oxidative therapy could be in the conventional model, chemotherapy or radiation. In more of a natural holistic model, it could be things like hyperbaric oxygen, IV vitamin C, IV ozone, stuff like that. So I look at, when I'm thinking about like gut infections, I'm thinking something similar. I'm like, hey, if we can press these parasites, candida, things like that, if we can press them metabolically by taking away what their preferred fuel sources are, and then we pulse them with really strong herbs, antimicrobials, oregano, garlic, berberine, right? Different compounds like that, wormwood, right? Now they're weakened because they're pressed, they're metabolically stressed, and now we're able to get in there with food. They're consuming these herbs, and obviously they're not able to they're weak already, so they're susceptible, so they're going to go down in flames.
Yeah, and a lot of these chemicals or a lot of these infections, they actually create a lot of cravings for a lot of the refined sugar because it's easy to process. So from a compliance standpoint, if we can knock a lot of these microbes down, it's going to improve your compliance being on that diet, because all these chemicals won't be secreted that'll create all those cravings too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So you'll notice, and that's a cool thing about a keto approach too, is, after like the first 2 weeks, the first week or two, as you're adapting into it, the hunger, the cravings really go down significantly. And if you are noticing really strong cravings, oftentimes has a lot to do with what's going on in your microbiome. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of using like binders in those cases, right? To try to kind of clear and sweep some of that stuff up. So whether it's activated charcoal or bentonite clay or like humic fulvic acids, things like that, to try to sweep stuff out of there faster, can really help people that are struggling with the cravings.
Totally. And if anyone's listening to this right now and is really enjoying it, make sure you click the link below so you can get access to the Keto Edge Summit. This is going to be just a sneak preview of all the great knowledge bombs that will be dropped. Again, we'll have links below. Again, justinhealth.com/keto edge. justinhealth.com/keto edge to get access to this phenomenal summit. And then Dr. Dave, what's your experience with adding maybe a little bit of prebiotic fibers in, maybe some unripened banana flour or some inulin or chicory root supplementally as kind of a prebiotic, or some fructo-oligosaccharides? Any experience there?
Yeah, I think for most people, unless they've got SIBO or some sort of a FODMAP issue, they're going to respond well to small amounts of that. Some people, there's it's a bell curve. There's some people that respond really well to higher doses of these sort of resistant starches, whereas other people don't, right? As they get more of those, they start gaining more weight, they feel more sluggish, more gas, bloating, right? Issues like that. So I think it's a case by case basis, but I think as long as, like, hey, if you can eat, for example, if you can eat a bowl of steamed broccoli and not feel gassy and bloated and be cramping after that, okay, then you probably could do well on resistant starch.
Yeah, and I think if you could have some sauerkraut or maybe some low sugar kombucha, you can handle that. You probably would do okay with that.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of a good test, right? To litmus test to see if you're ready for some sort of resistant starch.
I think that's great. On to myth number 4. Is a ketogenic diet bad for thyroid and adrenal health? Now, I'll just chime in here. I'm coming out with my Thyroid Reset Summit, which will be this fall, which you'll be a part of. And I want you to speak more in depth on this, but just to put a couple things out there,
absolutely.
a lot of people have insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is your body over secreting insulin to help get that glucose into the cell. High amounts of insulin can have major effects on thyroid hormone activation or conversion, T4, inactive thyroid hormone, to T3. Now, that being said, I think a majority of population fits into that, where if that insulin resistance is there, a ketogenic diet may be really helpful. I'll kind of give you the baton here.
Yeah, totally. I would say any sort of major dietary change is a mild stressor on the body. And so if somebody's stress resistance or ability to adapt to stress is really, really low, okay, then they need to gently and gradually shift as they start making these nutrition changes. They need a kind of a slower change, as opposed to, it's kind of similar to, if you're sedentary, you haven't exercised, and then you think, okay, I'm going to go out and run a 5K. You do that, you're going to be really, really sore and beat up. You're going to think exercise is the worst thing possible. However, if you gradually move into a more active lifestyle, you'll notice less pain, less soreness, and you'll just become a natural part of your lifestyle. So really, you got to look at your ability to adapt to stress first, right? And I'm sure many listeners and many of the clients that come to us, Dr. J, their ability to adapt to stress, number one, is not very good. So we wouldn't necessarily put somebody on a ketogenic diet that had very low stress adaptation. So that's the first thing that I would say. Second thing is that really inflammation, okay, there's no better diet and nutrition plan to reduce inflammation fast than a ketogenic approach or fasting. Okay, that's going to reduce inflammation faster than anything in your body. But again, it can be stressful for the system, right? To just all of a sudden go into something along those lines. But by reducing inflammation, okay, that's going to help improve not only, most people with thyroid issues are dealing with autoimmune issues. And so it's going to reduce the autoimmunity on the thyroid. It's going to reduce thyroid nodule production, things like that. It's also going to help improve liver function as well as gut function. And the liver and the gut are responsible for the main aspect of converting inactive T4 into active T3. And also, if the cells are real inflamed, we're not going to get good expression of the T3 in the cell and in the mitochondria to begin with. So reducing inflammation is the most important thing to helping improve thyroid hormone expression and to reduce stress on the body. Okay, so from a theoretical perspective, a ketogenic diet and fasting can be amazing for thyroid and adrenals. Now, the other element that we've got to look at is this element of feast and famine. So when we're fasting, or if we're doing a ketogenic approach and we're keeping our insulin real low, our body, it's kind of a signal to our body and our genome that we're in a time of famine, okay? Because typically when our ancestors came across a lot of food, they would eat a lot of it, so they would feast, and insulin would go up. So they would have kind of an insulin spike, not quite at the insulin spike we get today when we eat a whole bag of Frito-Lays, but nevertheless, they would get a rise in insulin. And so that told the body, okay, we're in a period of feasting right now. And then we never, that might last for a day or two. And then we might have a whole week where we barely got any food. And so this kind of feast and famine cycling is what our genome is accustomed to. And it's actually healthy for priming it. And so basically, when we're in a time of famine for a long period of time, like following a ketogenic lifestyle and being in ketosis for a month, 2 months, 3 months or longer, just all together without cycling out of that, it can send a signal. For some individuals, they feel really good. Thyroid hormone expression is great. For other individuals, their T3 might start to lower. Like the thyroid hormone may start to lower. They may get lower amounts of thyroid activity at the cell and in the genome because the body's saying, okay, we're in a period of famine. We want to slow down metabolic rate. We want to slow down the amount of energy and the amount of energy that we're basically breaking down. So that may be a signal. So for many individuals that have kind of a thyroid issue or possibly an adrenal issue coming in, cycling carbs and finding a good strategy for that, where you have kind of this ketogenic lifestyle as your foundation, but then finding strategic times to cycle in a little bit of carbs or protein to get a little bit higher insulin can tell our genetics, hey, we're in a time of feasting now. We can reactivate thyroid hormone, get that out, and bump that up for a period of time, and finding kind of the right cycle for you.
Totally makes sense. Now, last question here. Is a ketogenic diet practical long term? Can you follow it long term?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a lot of people think, well, wow, that's such a major dietary change, and it's such a restriction from what we grew up with, which was grains at every meal, and high carb foods. But actually, what you find is that after the adaptation process, which is roughly a week to 2 weeks, depending on the individual, you actually notice that your cravings go down significantly. If sometimes for many people they're non-existent, you barely ever feel hungry. I have a lot of people writing me that are like, you know what, I can't eat more than one meal a day. And so for a lot of people, just the idea of even eating, uh, that idea reduces. And so they're able to open up so much more time for everything else in their life. They're still able to enjoy really good foods, the kind of foods that Dr. J and I have been talking about. But at the same time, they're not driven by the need to eat every 3 to 4 to 5 hours, right? Just constantly having to eat, constantly having to plan out meals. I know for myself, I eat 1 to 2 meals a day. For the most part, I can't remember the last time I ate breakfast. So I'm eating once or twice a day. I'm not driven by food. I eat with my family, enjoy, a good time there. I might have a protein shake after my workout, and that's about it. So the actual time it takes for food preparation, for cleanup, things like that is significantly reduced. I'm able to really stay focused and do the things I was put on the planet to do rather than being driven by food. And so that's what most people experience as they get going with this. That actually it's a lot easier to follow, a lot more sustainable than they actually originally thought.
Love it. Yeah, basically you're switching the metabolic machinery. Instead of starting that campfire and running on kindling and paper and gasoline, we're putting good healthy logs on the fire that allow that fire to burn longer and stronger.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
I mean, that's
phenomenal.
really what it's about. Yep.
And then also, just to piggyback what you said before, I know
Yeah.
when the Atkins diet kind of got popularized in the 50s and 70s,
Mhm.
but with Dr. Atkins, there was a lot of thought that all the benefit just came from cutting the carbohydrate, which does help with a lot of the insulin sensitivity. But I think a lot of people in the ketogenic community, what they did was cutting out grains and cutting out some of these inflammatory foods made a huge difference. And now we kind of have this like paleo ketogenic template where we understand that the nature of inflammatory foods. We understand maybe artificial sweeteners aren't as good because the carbohydrates aren't there. They still may not be as good, or the refined vegetable oils or the soy proteins and the xenoestrogen. So I think we've taken the ketogenic diet and brought it to the next level, looking at the micronutrients, looking at the macronutrient quality, and then also looking at the inflammatory nature of the food and not just lumping it all into this carbohydrate template.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, ultimately, we want an anti-inflammatory diet. And I just want to also remind everybody too that basically when you're on a ketogenic lifestyle, your insulin is going to go down significantly. And the benefit of that is significant reduction in inflammation and cell reproduction. So that's amazing. However, the other thing is insulin retains minerals. Okay. So when insulin goes down, we lose more hydration and more minerals. In fact, when you lose weight early on in a ketogenic diet, typically it's water weight in the first week or so, because your body's just getting rid of this fluid and minerals. And one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is they're not replacing the minerals and the hydration. So if you're going to try this approach, I would highly recommend making sure you're hydrating well, consuming a lot of trace mineral rich foods, a lot of the foods that we already talked about, fermented foods, olives, avocados, sea vegetable, wild caught fish, pasture-raised animal products, very rich in trace minerals. Use a good high-quality sea salt or like a pink Himalayan salt on your foods and salt it well, and stay hydrated throughout the day. Really, really hydrate your body well, because you need that extra water. And that's really, one of the key ways to get healthy anyways. You just gotta pee your way to good health, right? So consume a lot of that water and just flush out toxins, and you'll feel a lot better when you do that.
Yeah, make sure you're adding a pinch of good quality sea salt to your water. 5 to 7 servings of green veggies and 1 full avocado a day should get you that 4,700 milligrams of potassium you need. Also, the bone broth, sipping that as well can give you the extra sodium and the electrolytes, because that's one of the big things. If you're having cramping or these issues, make sure your potassium's up. 4,700 milligrams or higher, magnesium, a gram or 1,000 milligrams a day or higher. And then make sure the water you're drinking is also clean filtered water, but also mineral rich, or make sure you add a pinch of sea salt. Would you agree?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And that's huge, especially if you're following this ketogenic approach and you're noticing fatigue. If you're dealing with fatigue, then I would highly consider looking at your hydration. Also, if you're dealing with a lot of hunger and cravings as you're going through it, really consider your hydration. Start really focusing on hydration. I've found that about 75% of the people that I've worked with that notice a lot of fatigue and cravings as they're following this ketogenic approach, once we address the hydration and the minerals, they feel a lot better.
Huge.
For some of
Absolutely.
those individuals, they may need like a little bit of thyroid hormone, something along those lines.
Yep.
But for many of them, it's just a hydration and mineral issue.
Totally. Last two things I'm going to put out there. We hit our top 5 myths. So this is bonus round. So anyone that's sticking around here, you're getting some extra gems. Number 1, ketoacidosis versus ketosis. My take is, number 1, ketosis is, we're talking nutritional ketosis. We're not talking ketosis via starvation. We're talking ketosis via adequate nutrition with keeping carbohydrates down. That is a good thing. Ketone levels, maybe 1 to 2 millimoles. Ketoacidosis, 10 and up on the millimoles of ketones. And number 2, primarily happening in type 1 diabetic patients without adequate levels of insulin. Insulin drops. Okay. Fuel can't get into the cell. The body freaks out and overproduces ketones to help compensate for the fuel source. What happens? That high level of ketones is acidic, drops the pH, and then can put you into a coma via very low pH. Go ahead. I'll let you give your take on it.
Yeah, basically, ketoacidosis is only going to happen in a type 1 diabetic or a type 2 who's completely lost the ability to produce insulin. Yeah. And they more or less need to be neglecting their health. They need to be non-cognizant that they need to actually take supplemental insulin, taking an insulin injection. And so that's really the only way. And it's characterized by really super high blood sugar, like blood sugar 300 and above sometimes, okay? And really, really high ketones, like you said, 10. Really, it's more like 15 to 20 or above.
Yes.
With the ketones. Whereas with nutritional ketosis, your blood sugar is going to be under 100. Sometimes it's going to be like 60 or 70.
Yeah.
Some people are even saying, at times their blood sugar's in the 40s and 50s. So very, very low blood sugar because your body's very insulin sensitive. And then your ketones, rather than being in this 20 to 25 range, they're going to be roughly somewhere between 0.5 and maybe 3.0, depending on, unless you're fasting. Okay. The only way you're really going to get up above 3.0 is kind of an extended fast.
I think it's really important because the conventional medical doctors out there, they have virtually zero training, and even RDs, zero training in nutrition from optimal health. They're very skilled in nutrition for pathology. Like you talk about vitamin C, we're going to talk about vitamin C benefits. They're going to talk about vitamin C and scurvy. They're going to talk about, beriberi and B1 deficiency. They'll talk about if you go into ketosis, benefits of ketosis, they're going to basically conflate that with ketoacidosis. So just be careful. You're seeing your conventional medical doctor and you're engaging in the benefits of a ketogenic diet and ketosis. They're going to probably conflate that. And that's kind of the litmus test to see if your doctor knows what they're talking about. Yeah,
exactly. And I think just in general, doctors as a whole, we have this know-it-all mask because we're high achievers, we're high performers. And so we just figure if we didn't learn about it in medical school, or if it hasn't been like put right in our face, that it must not be good or it must be some sort of a fad. And so rather than just being humble, it takes a really humble individual to say, you know what, that's interesting. I haven't looked into it yet. So I really don't know. And so for a doctor to say, I don't know, very rarely ever happens. So they're going to typically have a strong opinion because they're trying to provide their patient certainty. However, their opinion may not be based on any sort of real true knowledge. And if they were really looking through the scientific literature and studying that on ketosis, they'd actually be excited about utilizing this with their patients.
Totally. And then last thing I want to put out there, I want to get your take on it too, is I see a lot of patients, they switch from a ketogenic diet or they switch from a standard American diet to a lower carb kind of ketogenic paleo template. One of the biggest thing I see is they tend to be eating a lot of carbohydrate, which tends to be easier to digest and process. Now they're eating a lot more fat, a little bit more protein, and they start feeling worse from a bloating or digestive standpoint. Yeah. One of the things I find is that more protein and more fat can be a little bit tough on the digestive system. And a lot of people, a ketogenic template can reveal the weak link in their digestive secretions regarding low stomach acid, low enzymes. And some people need to up the bile salts, up the HCl, up the enzymes. And if you move from a ketogenic template and you start noticing those symptoms, it doesn't mean the diet is not good for you or bad.
Right.
It's revealing a weak link in your digestive system. Go ahead, Dr. Dave.
I mean, it's absolutely the truth. And so most people, because of stress is the antagonist to digestive juice production. And so for our
Yes.
body to be able to break down food, particularly meat, you take a look at meat, unless it's like a really, really well cooked, like chicken soup or something like that. If you just take a
Mhm.
steak, that steak, you're going to need a lot of stomach acid, digestive enzymes, bile in order to really break that down and metabolize it well. And so as we start to age, and stress in general is going to reduce our ability to produce the stomach acid we need, the bile, the pancreatic enzymes. And so, yeah, absolutely. Supplementing with that can be extremely helpful. I've seen that just be a lifesaver for so many different individuals. And doing different strategies like drinking ginger tea throughout the day can be really helpful.
Mhm.
What else? Doing like lemon, putting fresh squeezed lemon or lemon juice or apple cider vinegar on the meat, like before you actually eat it, starts
Yep.
pre-metabolizing it. Same, you can do it on the vegetables too. Actually starts pre-metabolizing, breaking down the meat and the vegetables before it even gets into your body. So it makes it easier in your digestive system. And really, ultimately, it's all about, we want to take stress off the digestive lining, because there's only one cell wall, our intestinal lining. So if we're constantly putting food that's not well digested up higher in our stomach, for example, into that intestinal lining, it's like we're just scarring it right up. We're tearing that intestinal lining up. We're going to create leaky gut. We're going to get more
Bingo.
inflammation and have a lot more problems. So yeah, taking really, really good care of your digestive lining is very important. I know you teach that. I teach that. I've got a
Yeah.
lot of articles on my website all about that, and we do touch on that as well in the Keto Edge Summit. We really focus in on helping people improve their digestion so they can follow this ketogenic lifestyle and do it effectively.
Awesome. Love it. So everyone listening, lots of knowledge bombs. Again, when you talk with two doctors like us, we're providing clinical information, not theoretical stuff, actual information you can use to help improve your health and your life. And if you're listening so far and you like this is the tip of the iceberg, right? Iceberg in the back.
Yeah.
justinhealth.com/keto edge. And again, we'll put the link down below. So if you're driving or you can't get it, you can click down below. And again, support the summit, get the information out there, share it with any of your friends or family that have any inflammation or any health issue. They're going to benefit totally. And then also feel free and check out drjockers.com. Dr. Jockers has got the best blog post out there, amazing infographics. Again, even if you don't want to read it, if you just check out the images in his blogs, you can learn so much.
Yeah. Thanks so much, man. Yeah, that's a big thing we try to do on my website, is make it as image rich as possible. I hate reading websites where it's just narrative. It's like I tune out quickly. So we really try to make it as image rich as possible, give people a really great reader experience. So I appreciate you acknowledging that.
You got it, Dr. Dave. Well, appreciate everything and look forward to the summit going live in the next month. Everyone click down below, subscribe.
Yeah.
Dr. Dave, it's great chatting with you. We'll talk real soon.
Absolutely. By the way, you definitely want to tune in on day 2 for Dr. J's talk, where he really dives into hypothyroidism and the ketogenic diet. We go a lot deeper than we did today.
Oh, that's great. Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for that plug, and we'll talk soon, Dr. Dave. Take care.
All right. Take care.
Bye.